Hey, Lawrence here, welcome to Business Beats. Today we're talking about shiny object syndrome. SOS is what I call it. It is the destructor of productivity, time, and efficiency. It kills all of it. So we're gonna do a deep dive on shiny object syndrome today. Thanks for joining. Okay, shiny object syndrome is the name that I give it, right? We're gonna deep dive on that. And the reason why we're doing that today is because I've been experiencing a lot of it in the last few days, my own business, right? So I certainly like to talk about things that are happening inside our company live right now, right? So it's relevant, it's current. It's a weird subject to talk about shiny object syndrome because the real word for it is distraction, right? Distraction. It's like if I threw something in the corner, a shiny object, would you just go and chase it? You know, I know a cat would do that, but you're not a cat. Well, you could be a cat, I don't know. I'm assuming that you're a human, but, and you just go running after it, right? There's so many different levels to that. It's crazy when you really start to unpack it and you do a thorough deep dive, right? What that looks like. So let me break it down in some easy context and really talk about it because I think it's really, really common. I think it's in most businesses. I think it's in most people's personal lives and in most families, right? And I think as an individual, a vertical individual, human walking this planet, I think we all suffer from it to some point. And it's about recognizing that, being honest about it, identifying it, finding solutions, and then executing against that, right? But it's very, very common. And it can cost a lot of money if you don't catch it or you're not aware of it, right? So you have to be conscious of it. And I'm constantly talking about this. I constantly see people running around a business inside a company chasing the shiny objects. So let me give you a couple of scenarios what I mean by that. Okay, so the first one would be, we all work to a quarterly strat, right? So there's one quarter. Inside that quarter, there's all these different things that we have to complete, achieve, finalize, right? Now, the issue with that is people sometimes don't know how to manage that. It's like juggling 4 or 5 balls and then someone throws another one at you and then you have to put that in there as well. It's very task orientated and it's very hard, right? So there's some methodologies that you can wrap around that. But before I get into that, back to the scenario. So I've got 3 tasks that I have to complete by the end of the week. They're really high priority and they're in my strategy, right? I should be laser focused on those tasks and not really let anything distract me. Someone comes to my office and says, hey, look at this. I go, wow, that's super interesting. And then we end up standing there and talking for 30, 40 minutes about it. And then the next thing you know, my whole day has gone in a different direction. And it happens all the time, Now, here's the dangerous thing. Multiply that by 50. If one person is doing it in your business 1 or 2 times a day, and you have 25 staff, let's say if that happens 50 times. So what happens is the focus, right, or the goal, or running towards your MTP, gets diluted and you get a little bit confused about what you should be doing, that you're committed to, and to what you're doing now. That's a shiny object. It seems like a bit of fun. I think I might chase after this now. So you've got to be very careful. It happens all the time. No one is ever conscious of it, by the way. I think it requires a leader and a manager to be conscious of it and to really slow that down and to make people aware of it. And I think you just have to do that. As a founder, a CEO, general manager, chief operating officer, whatever it is, if you're in a business and you're responsible for managers, supervisors, leaders, you have to make them aware of it. I think you have a responsibility to do so because what will happen is your productivity and efficiency will drop dramatically and then moving towards your strat outcomes for the quarter, you don't achieve them. And then it hits the bottom line, right? So your business starts to move into decline and you're trying to figure out what's going wrong because if you're not conscious of it, you don't see it, so you don't know that it's there. And you think it's about sales and marketing. Well, in actual fact, it's about managers getting distracted with things that they shouldn't be involved in. So happening in my business, look, it's going to happen. No one's going to die. It's okay. But at critical mass, it becomes a critical outcome, right? It can affect a company dramatically. So that's why we're talking about that today, because I've been experiencing that in the last couple of days, right? So it's sort of in my amygdala, in my frontal cortex, and I'm processing it and trying to figure out how we deal with that. Another scenario is where you're in a meeting, right? So this happens all the time. By the way, meetings will kill productivity. My advice would be keep them to 20 to 30 minutes max, have someone responsible to take minutes, make sure those minutes have executable or actionable items in them, so it's not just a whole bunch of information with no outcome, and ensure that you align responsibility to a human to carry out the action in that task, right? Really critical to do that. Anyway, back on track. So meetings, 20, 30 minutes tops. Now think about when you have a meeting and you pull people into the meeting, right? For example, you have the general manager in there, you might pull on the CEO, that's two people. Let me do that piece. It's two people. You might pull on the marketing manager, 3 people, maybe the sales manager, 4 people, and maybe the commercial manager, 5 people, 5. There's probably 1, 2, 3, there's probably, $750,000 wrapped up in one room. Do you need all those people in there? So whoever called the meeting, what are you doing? That type of meeting is a quarterly meeting or an end of month meeting, which is attached to sales, revenue, and marketing and all that really important stuff. And it should be 20 to 30 minutes. You should not be doing those on a weekly basis or a daily basis. If you are, get your head read, because it just doesn't make sense. It's a very old school thing to do, a very 20th century thing to do, right? These big companies, all they have was meetings all day. I can guarantee that state government and federal government are having meetings all day. And are they actually achieving anything? I don't know. But in a private commercial enterprise, you can't afford to do that, unless you're a multi-billion-dollar company. Well, then it doesn't matter, because you've done nothing right anyway. But so that would be my advice on that. So that shiny object syndrome can look differently, right? Sometimes it is chasing the project down, the shiny object. Or I also call it Bambi walking through the forest, right? Poor Bambi. Remember Bambi? And Bambi's got a red dot on her forehead, waiting for someone to pull the trigger, right? So you've got to just stay out of the forest. So be focused. If someone comes into your office to distract you, you need to just shut it down, right? How do you do that? Well, just honesty and transparency. Professionalism, do it the right way. You don't want to be an asshole to anybody, but you need to say, hey, look, I'm really focused at the moment. I've got 1 minute, but if it's longer than that, can you just send me an email? And I'll come back to you if I think it's important. So that's normally what I would do. I would just say, hey, look, I can't deal with this right now. Keep your door closed if you need to, but sort of stay away from it. So it's that perpetual motion of people coming up with things that they think they need to do when they don't, that pulls them away from their core tasks that are really, really important, because it's different. Like, think about it. If you're doing the same thing every day, right? So you're getting into that repetition, and which is what a business needs, by the way, is some consistency and repetition. It gets a bit boring, right? So the shiny object looks quite attractive, and you want to chase it. And I get it. Sometimes, look, as a founder and a CEO, I actually do it too, and I've got to pull myself up on it. So be conscious of it. I think it's really important. It's just one of those unforeseen psychological events that happen in a company, inside a business, that no one is really attuned to, right? You just don't see it. Be conscious of it. I just want to move to how you sort of deal with it in the greater context of culture, right? So in the greater context of culture, you just need to open it up, open the door and put it on the table and talk about it. I would make, tomorrow we're doing this, right? We're having a, what I call an EXO meeting or a strat meeting, all hands for managers. And I will go in and just raise concerns, right? Like those meetings, by the way, when it comes to managers, it's not fairy floss and rainbows, right? It's to the point, and it's quite aggressive, assertive conversations about things that we're not doing well at. So we have the culture where it's a pretty 10X culture. It's a pretty strong culture. It's not a woke culture. We're not there to pat people on the back. We will do that another time, in another way, in our way. But when it comes to stamping out things like shiny object syndrome inside a company, you talk about it, you come up with a strategy and then you execute against it. and then you eliminate the issue, right? But you have to hold someone accountable to it. Someone has to be held accountable for it, to drive it and to run it and make sure that it happens, right? And what happens when you do that is you'll find that your communication opens up about it, you become honest and transparent about it, and you lift your standards, right? Standards are really important. I think people underestimate that now, where people just can't run around a business and do whatever they want because they're paid to do a job, so they need to do that job, right? And they need to be held accountable to that job, and they need to do it to a standard that the company requires. Whew. Wow, that was a bit of a rant, Lawrence. But seriously, treat your employees well, look after them, nurture them, train them, and do all those great things. But all I'm saying there is on the other side of the fence, a business has to be sustainable and to operate well, to be able to pay everyone salaries, to give them promotions, and create an environment and a company with a great culture that can go out and help people and have contribution, right? It takes revenue to do that. So you have to focus on the things that no one wants to talk about. And that's sort of my job as a founder and CEO. I'm responsible to talk about the things no one wants to talk about. You know what I mean? So, but someone has to. Maybe the CEO, the founder, or the general manager would be responsible for that. So we certainly make sure that we talk about that stuff. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. If someone's feelings if you hurt someone's feelings, it's because you don't do that. Because it's a bit of a shock, right? It's like, oh my God, I thought it was doing the right thing, running over here and taking care of this. So here's the thing, with repetition, you keep talking about that transparently and openly, people get used to those conversations. They just do. They get used to the conversation. And then, it's never really a problem when you talk about it. So you should just do it more frequently. That would be my take on it. I think that's really important. So you should do that. Shiny object syndrome, right? It's pretty dangerous. Now, people think that like I said before, that they're doing the right thing. And look, and they sort of are. Their intent is not to do the wrong thing. Their intent is always to do the right thing, right? Humans are innately pretty good. So, and if you've got a good team and a good crew, they don't mean to be running in a different direction. The company requires strategic direction. Think about the Titanic, right? God bless the Titanic. Only if they had better quality radar. Anyway, look, think about the Titanic. It takes a lot to move it, right? So one little movement from an employee or a line manager or someone inside a business won't turn the ship, right? So you got to look at strategically, everyone needs to be moving in the same direction. I probably didn't phrase that very well, but everyone's got to be moving in the same direction. And the only way you get that is through strategy. So everyone's got a strategy, right, that moves the ship in the right direction all at the same time. Because what happens if you get people running over here, and over here, and you need them to help steer the ship, this ship is going to go that way or that way. You need it to go that way because that's revenue and sales up, and that's not. I hope that makes sense. It's not the best way to explain it, but it's real, right? So be conscious of that. A business strategy, commercial strategy requires quarterly and monthly and weekly strategies executed by line managers to be done well and to be done in synergy with everybody else. Now, if there's something that's really important that comes into fold, obviously put that on the table, talk about it, but put a strategy in place to ensure that the key strategy doesn't get affected. And it might be, hey, look, this isn't that important. How about we pull this out, we put it in next month, and we move this really urgent thing and we put it here. So you're not, the time doesn't inflate for the individual to get that action done, right? And it doesn't stress everybody out. It doesn't put pressure on the team. Sometimes you've got to move a few players around the chessboard, so to speak, to free up time to do that. I'm just going to pivot slightly. I also want to talk about, I came up with this concept of how do you strategize your day, right? I call it the pizza effect. Yeah, that's right. I know. It's an amazing name, right? The pizza effect. Where your day should be comprised of doing multiple things in certain time brackets. People who chase shiny objects normally do this. They normally, say they, it's 10:30. There you go, I just picked a time, 10:30. And all of a sudden they see something, a shiny object, and then they get involved in it. And then it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon and they're still doing it. Here's a really bad thing that can happen. They come in the next day and they continue to do it. Now, here's a problem. If it's not on the strat and no one sees it and they did it for a week and there's a 30-day outcome, results that you have to achieve, that's getting close to a third of the time is being focused on something that isn't on strategy. Whew, that's pretty dangerous. So that's why I like to talk about this, because I think it's important. If it's not on the strategy, it's really going to hit the business, right, commercially and probably financially, as long as the strat's in alignment with that financial result. So I like to break everything down into sections. The pizza effect, any sort of pizza, pepperoni, ham and cheese, supreme, it's my favorite. So you cut the day into fours, right? And what happens with those lines through that day activity is that you can rub one out and then you get a bigger piece, right? So you get 2 pieces now, and then there's 2 on this side. And that means that work for an hour, hour and a half on one thing, stop, move to the next thing, right? Stop, move to the next thing, stop, move to the next thing. So now I'm across 4 different verticals in my day and everything is moving forward. I get a little bit of flexibility. I get to do different tasks. I'm not doing the same repetitive thing over and over again. It frees my mindset up a little bit, so I get to work on a creative project, then I have to go into an administrative project. So it keeps me relatively balanced. And then when I get to the end of the week, I've completed 5 or 6 projects instead of 1. I've completed 5 or 6 projects instead of 1 project. Because if I was chasing the shiny object and working on 1 project for 4 days, I'm not going to get anything else done. So there's a book called Kaizen, which is the Japanese art of efficiency or time efficiency. I'm paraphrasing, don't quote me on that. And when I read that book, there's a very simple premise in it, right, that really registered with me, that really forced me to think about time. It was a scenario where there's 5 people in an office, right? And it was about the location of a printer, right? It's crazy. I know, it's so simple, but bear with me. There's a point to it. So the theory goes, there's 5 people in an office and there's 1 printer. The person who prints the most should be located closest to the printer. Make sense? They have to get up, walk to the printer, get there. Pretty easy to understand. And then what you need to do is you need to figure out who prints the second highest quantity of paper, and then you put them the second closest to the printer, and it just goes around in circles. And you get to the end of that scenario, and the one who doesn't print at all should be the furthest away, right? If you couldn't accommodate them in the right sort of makeup. If they all printed equally, the printer should be in the middle. Simple premise, right? So that's about efficiency, right? And every little thing can count. The 1%ers, when you compound them over a month, 30 days, a quarter, a year, really, really add up. You lose focus, you lose momentum, you lose efficiency, and you lose productivity. So all I'm saying is, shiny object syndrome, be very, very cautious of it. As a leader, be aware of it. And as an individual, be conscious of it as well, because it doesn't just extend to business, it extends to your personal life. What's going on in your personal life? Have you taken on too much? Are you trying to do too much? Are you trying to create too much result or activity inside your personal life that you're not getting enough time with family members, friends, and all that sort of stuff, right? Because you're chasing things all over the place, right? It's like you get invited to a party and it's just a yes. And then you get invited to another thing that's just a yes, like you don't even think about it. Sometimes you got to put things into quadrants, right? And think about what's really important to me at this stage of my life. And I'm going to say no, 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 and I'll say yes to that. So don't be afraid to say no. It's actually pretty important to say no. Same thing with shiny object syndrome inside of business. So sometimes, you just have to say no. Someone comes over and interrupts you and tries to distract you. You just have to say no, mate. I don't want a part of it. I'm out. Done. So think about that. Look, I hope that helped. It's something that I'm really conscious about right now. I'm conscious about distraction. I'm conscious about efficiencies. And for me, it always attracts to how is the company going financially, right? And not that we're always focused on finance and generating revenue, but we are focused on growing a business because we have a purpose, right? A massive transformative purpose to run towards. We want to help people achieve prosperity in their lives, and to do that, we need to be very, very focused. And I take that I'm very responsible, and I take a lot of responsibility for that. So Hope that helped. Shiny object syndrome, stay away from it. If you haven't already, look, we're a non-profit venture, so click the subscribe button. Really appreciate you watching, and look forward to speaking to you next time. Thanks.